Okay, guys, good afternoon. Good to see you all. Hope you're doing well. And yeah, just 1 minute basically, or a minute and a half, and then we'll resume with the class. Hey, Paul, how's it going? Hello, Austin. There you are. Kayla, you had a Columbo experience, like the old detective TV show? The show's hilarious, but why? My memories of Columbo are kind of vague, but I've watched some episodes. Very deadpan. Kind of stumbles into the solution to a lot of those mysteries. You found a rat head and tail on your patio. Okay. Well, that's not good. That sounds more like a Godfather moment, to be honest. Are you someone going to kill you? Hopefully not. Hi, Anthony, Jake. Well, that's okay. Let's see. Experience, interpretation, analysis. What's your first interpretation? Well, okay. Yeah, well, I mean, it sounds like you're having a pretty interesting and quite scary life, Paul. Okay, so the possum is trying to deposit things in front of your door. I mean, it's not like your pet possum, right? Why does it want to impress you with the retrieved carcass of a dead animal? I've heard that happen in the case of cats, maybe dogs. But yeah, fascinating. Hey, Matthew, Lauren, and everyone else, Alina, Jake. Good to see you guys. So first of all, as you should know, tonight, anytime before midnight, you have to send me the second homework assignment that you're working on. So not to forget it, it's page 151 and 2 in exercise 5-3 in the book. Okay, that makes sense, Paul. And yeah, so it's letters A through Z on those 2 pages. You simply have to send me the name of the fallacy that occurs in each example. It's a fallacy of relevance that occurs in each example. And in a few of the examples, the answer is no fallacy. So anyway, some of you have already submitted your work, which is nice. If you haven't, you still have until the end of the day, midnight. But after that, I'll have to assess a little late penalty. And what's going to happen next is that I will send out the answer key for that homework later tonight. Yeah, some of them might have been a little tricky or slightly ambiguous, but not to worry. I'm sure you did fine. The next thing that comes up is on Tuesday, the 20th, the next class meeting. We're going to have a quiz on Chapter 5. So that quiz is going to deal comprehensively with all 20 of the fallacies that we studied, not just a group of 8 from the fallacies of relevance. Today, the plan is to just wrap up the last couple fallacies of unwarranted assumption, and maybe to review a little bit the total set of all 20, and then I'll help you be prepared for the upcoming quiz on Tuesday. Yeah, well, Paul, it sounds like you're thinking of them in a pretty high-level way. You know, I mean, if you're very critical, you can always try to find some type of exception based on being picky enough. But I would say going with your best answer is usually going to give you the right answer. And most people will be able to get 100%. I mean, I'm not saying most people, but I know for a fact that many people, having submitted and graded this assignment in the past, are able to find out the right answers. So I have total confidence that you could do it too, but I appreciate that you struggled a little bit, and that's okay. Anyway, though, let's go through the last few fallacies of unwarranted assumption. We got as far as, am I right, as far as questionable cause? Isn't that correct? So we still have to deal with slippery slope and then the naturalistic fallacy. So 2 leftover fallacies of unwarranted assumption. Let me begin with the slippery slope fallacy. Okay, so slippery slope. Slippery slope is the idea, the unjustified idea in a given case, that if we permit a certain action or type of action, then eventually all actions of this type will either be taken or permitted. Okay, so one claims without sufficient evidence that if one action is taken or permitted, then eventually all actions of this type will be either taken or permitted. Okay, so slippery slope, a person is saying without good enough evidence that if one action is allowed or is taken, then eventually, maybe not immediately, but eventually down the line, all actions of that kind will be taken or permitted. And it's often described as the series of actions that follow from the initial one are like worse and worse. So it's kind of like a downward spiral of worse and worse consequences and results that follow from the initial action, which may have seemed innocent or innocuous at first. But this is oftentimes a fallacy where people make overhyped predictions of a negative series of outcomes based on one initial action that could be taken. So maybe you've heard the argument in terms of maybe you've had a parent or someone that has told you when you're getting to a certain age, there's going to be peer pressure on you to experiment with maybe alcohol or certain kinds of drugs. But I'll tell you this, don't even take one little sip of that alcoholic drink because it might seem like not a big deal right now. But once you've had that one little sip of alcohol, you're putting yourself on a slippery slope to an eventual future where you're a complete and total hopeless alcoholic addict who can no longer keep a job, finish school, raise kids, or stay out of problems with the law. Do you really want to become a completely dependent, penniless, pathetic drunk? No. So you shouldn't even take that one initial drink. But that's obviously a perhaps overly dramatized and sensationalized description of what could happen on the basis of the initial drink. Noah, you say if you're pregnant then your life is over. Well, you see, it's not exactly like that because that's not predicting a series of consequences from that type of action of the same kind that get worse and worse. So it's not exactly the same kind of idea. That's more like a scare tactic. Slippery slope foretells a series of increasingly negative results that come from one initial action. So it's like an innocent sip of alcohol to just try it, leading to a whole beer, a whole six-pack. Now you're drinking every day. Now you're onto hard liquor. Now you can't, go without it. Now you're getting tremors. Now you're a total addicted case who needs to see like some type of addiction specialist. Okay, there you go. There's another one, Prue. Don't cheat on an exam because if you cheat just once, you'll eventually, it won't even just stop with the exams. Let me go further than that. You're going to eventually not be able to do anything honestly. So you'll end up cheating on your taxes, cheating in your relationships, cheating the law. And this is going to lead to a self-destructive course of behavior. Eventually, you will no longer have control over your own behavior. You'll steal things, lie to people, and you'll just be a completely dishonest wretch. So don't try that first act of cheating. Now, there are valid reasons why you shouldn't be cheating, or maybe why you shouldn't drink alcohol, but we shouldn't make the argument on the basis of an overly exaggerated set of negative consequences unless we had detailed and sufficient evidence to illustrate that that's a probable result, not just a possible outcome. Sometimes in advertising and marketing, we see this too. I've seen commercials, like there was one insurance commercial, I can't remember what the provider was, but the ad was something like, when you don't have Allstate, then you might end up stuck on the side of the road with no ability to call a tow truck. And if you can't do that, then you might end up having to sleep there overnight. And if you have to sleep there overnight, then you might get robbed. And if you get robbed, you might end up having to, walk 20 miles to the nearest payphone. And if you have to do that, and then they just keep saying this stuff, eventually the last step is, and then you'll be in a ditch waiting for an ambulance. Don't get into that ditch waiting for an ambulance. Buy our insurance product. So it's like not buying the insurance product is the first initial decision that leads to the slippery slope of worse and worse negative consequences coming to you. I've heard it used in policy debates, and the textbook talks about some of those cases. Like they say, for example, well, have you heard about people that say, look, if we give people a little bit of a handout, like a government assistance, if we extend their unemployment benefits or increase them for like the purposes of the pandemic, then perhaps they will expect more handouts, and eventually they'll stop wanting to work, and therefore we'll eventually have a completely nanny state society where nobody works and we all just have fixed incomes given by the government. So don't take a step down that slippery slope by offering extended unemployment benefits in the beginning. But if you actually look at statistical data that's collected on this question, there's no real evidence that people become less industrious or less amenable to gainful employment and work just because they have some kind of unemployment insurance, which they pay into also, by the way, as workers. Your question here, Noah, can I submit handwritten work? No, I don't have any problem with your handwritten work. That's good. I do like your formatting. You're putting words in my mouth. I don't think I've ever said anything problematic about your formatting unless you did something wrong. Please submit handwritten work if you like, but it's fine for me either way. At the same time, Noah, there's no formatting on this homework assignment. All you have to do is say the name of the fallacy. So there's nothing that you have to write except for the name of the fallacy. Hi, Jonah. Good to see you. Okay, you submitted it 3 different ways. You're talking about, well, that's a different point, I think. That's file format rather than the way that it's written. But yes, I got your message and I was able to open it, no problem. It was a little overboard, to be honest, but not to worry. It's better to, I guess, be thorough than to be insufficient. Okay, so other cases of the slippery slope. Some people said that, hey, if we allow for gays in the military, there was a slippery slope pushback against that idea. Well, gays in the military is where it starts, but eventually that means that we're going to impact unit cohesion and military readiness. And so what sounds like a nice move to honor people's civil liberties is going to lead to a decline in military capabilities. Eventually then, we will be overrun by our enemies that will quickly subdue us because our fighting forces are no longer capable and effective. So obviously that would be yet another slippery slope fallacy. The policy has been changed and there's been no such loss of military capability from the United States or its allies. Yeah, you can send me a assignment through, what is it, the Apple app, what is it, Notes or Notepad? I mean, I'm able to open that as well. But anyway, yeah, there you go. What's some other examples that you guys can think of? Can anybody think of a case? There's gays in the military, gay marriage. I mean, some people said that, okay, if we allow gay people to get married, then that's going to open the door to less and less traditional forms of matrimony. Eventually, people will be able to marry themselves or their appliances or, you know, whatever, inanimate objects. Clearly, again, a dystopian projection of negative results from one policy change. Okay, yeah. Well, I have an Apple computer that I'm using to open these messages and stuff, so I think I'm pretty good with all file formats. So anyway, you always want to base predictions of future outcomes on the best evidence and research. Watch out for the tendency that some people have to make overhyped, exaggerated forecasts of a catastrophic sequence of events if one thing is allowed to happen. Slippery slope, as with some of the fallacies, is supposed to place within your mind a given visual. You're supposed to think of the actual concept of a person standing atop a high slope, which is steep and is slippery on all different sides. Think of someone that stands on top of that slope and someone says to them, hey, don't even take one step. Because if you take one step, it may look like it's a small little tiny step, but it's not going to stop with that. It's so slippery that the one step will cause you to lose your footing. And then you'll cascade down the mountain or hill, incurring a worse and worse series of injuries as you tumble down and hit everything as you fall. So it's like, be warned. One step is not going to just end there. It's going to become worse and worse and worse with a further negative sequence of consequences coming to the person who took the step. So on an actual slope, it would be literally don't take a step down that slope. But in a metaphoric sense, it's like, hey, don't you don't give in to your kid that's begging for a cookie at the grocery store, because if you give in to them today, then they will lack the ability to delay gratification as adults, and eventually they'll not be able to play by the rules anywhere at any time, and then they're going to be a misfit and a dysfunctional member of society. So, you know, that would be like another kind of case. Let's see if the book offers us any other examples. Yeah, no, I think that's good. I mean, there's one more I guess I see here. Expressing the concern that something will get out of hand is not always a fallacy. Sometimes the prediction that a particular action or policy will start us down a slippery slope is justified. So you do have to be able to distinguish between the two cases. I mean, if somebody says to you, I don't know if you should really inject that heroin because it's extremely addictive and even one usage is known to turn people into a strong addict, then there might be a better basis to make the negative prediction of what could happen later. But oftentimes slippery slope fallacies rely on weak or insufficient evidence to make their bold claims of this catastrophic future result. Just give the kid acid and scare him during his whole trip, then he won't be begging for a cookie. Lol, okay, funny. You know, when I was a little kid, I remember some children's stories. I don't know if these are still in circulation in this current generation or not, but I remember one. I'll throw it out there as just a point of reference. Give a mouse a cookie if you give a mouse a cookie. I don't know if you ever heard that, but the give a mouse a cookie story, in my mind, it's almost like, what kind of lesson were we trying to impart to these children? In a way, it's almost like the slippery slope fallacy is the moral of the story. In that little children's story, the situation is that there's a cute little mouse that wants some of your cookie while you're eating it. And it's like, well, if you give the mouse the cookie, then it's not going to stop with one cookie. He's going to eventually want like the whole bag of cookies. And then, you know, he's going to want his own place in the house to eat them, you know, so a nice little sectioned off area. And then he's going to want a little more space than that to just roam around. Eventually, he wants to take over the whole house. And then now you can just go to the shed or the garage and hang out there while the mouse can kind of takes over your living space. So it's sort of like, hey, the one well-intended act of generosity toward the little mouse is going to be taken advantage of and lead you into a worse and worse status quo from there. So don't even start that. I don't know if this is telling people, hey, charity won't be rewarded or good intentions will just be disrespected and used against you. So I don't know if I would honor all the messages in the story, but thinking about that story kind of reminds me a little bit of the slippery slope. Maybe the mouse is supposed to represent a more deviant character in society, and that's what makes this somehow like a good moral to learn from. But I'd have to go back to the source and try and remember what exactly they were teaching the kids. So anyway, yeah, that's slippery slope. Let's continue then. There's just one more fallacy overall in our whole set of 20. So we've gone through 6 of the different fallacies of unwarranted assumption, including slippery slope. And then the last one is the naturalistic fallacy. Okay, so naturalistic fallacy. Okay, so the naturalistic fallacy is simply this. It's based on the unjustified assumption that whatever is natural in some sense is good, and whatever is unnatural must be bad. Okay, so okay, unjustified assumption that whatever is natural is good and whatever is unnatural, bad. So people, for whatever reason, I find, are really caught up in the way of thinking that this fallacy explains. People have a tendency, just in general, or at least many people do, to think of whatever that is somehow described as being from nature, natural, as nature intended, unmodified by human beings or whatever, that is somehow always going to be a good thing. And if there's something that is man-made, artificial, synthetic, not given to us by, you know, nature, that must somehow be bad and to be avoided. But this is an overly general assumption, and it certainly is not true in every case. I mean, yes, obviously, sometimes natural things are good and unnatural things are bad, but it's way too simplistic and overly broad to say that is a general truth. For example, if you really think that everything that's not made by nature is bad, then turn off this computer right now. What are you doing? I mean, you're looking at a highly sophisticated piece of human technology. This is not something, this device that you're using, that just grows on trees or comes up out of the ground. Obviously, though, telecommunications, computing, transportation systems, energy are all innovations into the natural world, interferences with the natural world that mankind has been able to master and subdue. And that makes our lives much better and more efficient and happy and healthy in a lot of ways. So modern medicine, communication, transportation, energy production, all of these things are not natural. But if we really think that that's bad, then we should abandon all of these things. And Devin, you give this comment: you should only drink ocean water because it's natural. But multivitamins are bad because they're unnatural. There you go. Exactly. That's kind of the way of the naturalistic fallacy. COVID's looking pretty natural for sure, right? So what is really nature all about? I mean, nature doesn't necessarily have the best interests of a particular organism in mind, like specifically human beings. Nature gives us hurricanes, earthquakes, infectious diseases, and those things certainly aren't good for us. On the other hand, vaccines are certainly not made in nature. And for that exact reason, some people in the grip of this fallacy refuse to take them. They say, well, I'm not going to put that in my body. It came from a lab, so I'm going to have to deal with homeopathic, natural remedies. So, if a person's thinking of the naturalistic fallacy and they get a cancer diagnosis, maybe they'll say, I'm not going to go and take the full course of robust treatment. I don't want to expose my body to, radiation or chemotherapy, these kind of weird artificial methods of which to combat the disease. I'm going to just take certain kind of herbs and natural remedies and hope that that works. But that might give the person, they might have bypassed their best chance to have full remission and to get on the path towards full health. So a lot of times the things that human beings are able to control and create artificially, synthetically, man-made things can be good for us. Not, of course, everything. I don't know, nuclear bombs, pollution. There's a lot of bad things in there too, but you have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. Noah, how about the argument that marijuana is a natural plant? Yeah, so there you go, another case. Somebody could say, look, what's wrong with cocaine? I mean, it's a coca plant. It comes from the coca leaf. So God gave it to us. It's here for us to enjoy. It can't be a bad thing. It's right there in nature. So don't tell me I should stop doing coke. Obviously, if you have that view, you're going to be not serving your best interest in terms of your health and well-being. That's highly addictive substance. It can have detrimental impacts on your bodily organs and your heart. So obviously, just because it's something from nature doesn't necessarily mean that it's good. With respect to marijuana, I mean, it's a different drug, but the same kind of principle could be applied to it. Although perhaps if you just study its effects, it's not going to be on the same level as cocaine in terms of its destructive impact, just in a straight one-to-one comparison. But again, the form of reasoning is invalid. Just to say, okay, well, marijuana grows naturally, so it must be good for you. I mean, look, poison ivy is natural too, so maybe you should roll around in the poison ivy bush and see how that feels. A lot of natural things aren't going to be good for you, and on the other hand, some unnatural things can be. Cocaine is bleached and filled. Well, yeah, but did you know, Noah, there's a lot of indigenous people and stuff in South America and other parts of the world where they actually just chew on them and they still get the same psychoactive kind of effects, although it's not as refined as when people use like a base substance to create powdered cocaine or whatever, crack. So yeah, there's still a way that people can ingest and consume like naturally derived cocaine as a psychoactive chemical substance. But I understand your point. Okay, so hopefully that makes some sense. Let's talk about cases that are referenced in the book to just make it perfectly clear. The book says, for example, the naturalistic fallacy is based on the unwarranted assumption that what is natural is good or acceptable, and what is unnatural is bad and unacceptable. We find this fallacy in arguments that claim that no good could ever come from artificial intelligence simply on the grounds that it's artificial. Advertisers may use this tactic to try and get us to conclude that their product is good or healthy simply because it's natural. Now, there's another common tactic of marketers and advertisers to market their products to us as natural, organic, green, or whatever, as though that's going to settle all questions about whether it's a good choice or a good, healthy thing for you to use. For example, there are even tobacco manufacturers that market their tobacco products as 100% natural tobacco. And there's a lot of fast food companies and stuff that will be like 100% natural beef. But going off the example of tobacco, whether it's naturally grown or not, it still contains addictive chemicals like nicotine, and it has tar that can also lead to the development of cancer and so forth, and pulmonary disease. So you'd be a fool to just say, well, on the label it says it's natural, so I can't be harmed by it. It's got to be good for me, unlike those unnatural cigarettes. I mean, obviously all tobacco is natural, but so is arsenic, tsunamis, HIV, but we don't consider them to be healthy or desired after. The naturalistic fallacy is also sometimes used to justify homosexuality, saying, oh, well, it's natural in other animals, and also to argue against it, as in saying that homosexual encounters don't lead to the procreation of children, which is the natural goal of sexual interactions, therefore it must be immoral. In a similar manner, a person may argue that hunting is morally acceptable because other animals hunt and kill in nature. However, the fact that other animals are predators does not justify our doing the same. Some animals may eat their young, and a few female insects even eat their male partners. But these naturally occurring examples don't imply that it's acceptable or justified for humans to do the same. And what else have you said here? Noah, you're talking about opiates. Opiates in general are bad when abused. Many indigenous communities abuse poppy plants and other plants which contain opioids. Most of all, it is useful with the right dose. Yeah, so you're talking about American Spirit cigarettes next. They claim that it's just straight tobacco and tar and nicotine, but it's all bad. Yeah, I mean, you'd have to do your scientific research. Don't just take the advertiser or marketer's word for it. I mean, obviously, they're not going to present you with a balanced set of objective facts for you to decide on your own. They want you to be favorable to the product. So I would look at other consumer reports and crowdsourced information about it. It's always a good principle to live by. Like, right, if you're going to decide where to eat, are you just going to listen to the restaurant telling you how good their food is? No, you should go to Yelp or something and see how people review it. Yeah, and tobacco does include tar and nicotine naturally. So I think, Noah, even if that's the advertiser's claim, it's transparently false. And I wonder if it's accurate to say they market it that way, because we do have at least some baseline laws that protect against false advertising. So if a claim was put forward by a vendor of a product or service that was verifiably false, demonstrably false, then they would put themselves liable for false advertising lawsuits. But anyway, I'd have to investigate more to know the real details here. Okay. Yeah, people talk about mushrooms. I've read a study that said that they can be useful in treating certain forms of clinical depression. But once again, those are kind of new studies. They're contested in some circles of the scientific community, so I think consensus has to be developed. Perhaps it's been held back a little bit because a lot of those controlled substances, it's hard to get grants to do research for them in research institutions. It's a complicated process. So if that was more widely available, then perhaps more studies would be coming out, would be able to make more rational decisions about it. Okay, so that's naturalistic fallacy. Look, the atomic bomb's not so great, but the internal combustion engine or the, I don't know, the solar battery and stuff, there's many things that can be useful to us that are man-made. So you really would do better to examine on a case-by-case basis any claims that a thing is good or bad, and not just to look at it in terms of whether it's natural or not. Now, here's another thing I want to say about this whole naturalistic fallacy. Since I'm a philosopher, I think philosophically about this topic too. And I've often thought that in a way, the entire concept of the natural is not precisely defined, at least not to my satisfaction, right? Because when you look at bees or something else like a different life form, a different species, they sometimes cooperate with each other to create things that are the byproduct of their form of life. So in the case of bees, they create honey and they form those honeycombs. Ants, they create ant colonies and stuff. And beavers working together over even long spans of time can create these big dams and stuff by collecting pieces of wood and putting them together. And we don't say that's unnatural, right? But human beings are another species, a different life form. And I don't necessarily see why it's different to look at a human being constructing architecture or technology and to say that that's not just the natural byproduct of human beings, rational animals, doing their thing on the planet Earth. So when a human being creates like an automobile and we say, well, that's not natural, why is that so much different than a bee stuff creating like a honeycomb? To me, I've always thought that this is a slippery concept. And in a way, I almost think that the naturalistic fallacy is where we set the boundaries of what we call natural. Anything we feel good about, we just call it natural. Anything we think is not so nice, we say it's unnatural. But really, the distinction is, in my mind, kind of blurry and poorly explained. So I guess to be as charitable as possible to those that advance this distinction. Perhaps they mean that by natural, it's things that are not the byproduct of human creative behavior. And so I guess human beings then, maybe if we're elevated over and beyond the other animals because we have language and reason, maybe that's the only source of non-natural things, human beings creating nature. We don't create out of nothing. At the end of the day, any creation man makes roots from the natural, right? Of course, the raw materials that we use have to, of course, be derived from things found in the universe that are in the natural universe. Paul, you say, then you got Goop Lady pushing clean, whatever the hell that is. Oh, you're talking about, what is her name? The blonde actress woman that is famous for Gwyneth Paltrow. There you go. Yes, Gwyneth Paltrow is one of those that hawks the idea of natural remedies and homeopathic treatments and etc. for your wellness and health. I watched a few episodes of that show just as for comic relief. Yeah, it seems that that's somewhat of a hobby horse of certain people of the West to try and reintegrate ourselves with some feeling of lost connection to the natural world. And that somehow plays out in the way that we eat and work out and the things that we choose to put in our body. But anyway, yeah, pop culture reference. I take the point. It's a reasonable point. So that's that for the naturalistic fallacy. And in the end then, when you're dealing with other people and you're hearing arguments and sometimes you're the one presenting a point of view or an argument, there's a few things you can do to just avoid fallacies or try your best to avoid them. Know yourself. Know which fallacies that you're more likely to either commit or to fall for, and try and build up some awareness of that so that you can do better in such cases than to just immediately give into the fallacy or to give an example of one like that. Try and also work on your own confidence and self-esteem, because when you're not so confident, then you're more likely to give in to peer pressure or popular appeal. Also, when you're self-confident, you're less likely to back down when other people use fallacies on you or to become defensive and use fallacies on other people. Cultivate good listening skills. Be a respectful listener. Don't just sit back waiting for your chance to talk and attack the person's argument. Really listen to them and try and understand what they mean so that you can formulate a rational and reasonable response. If you notice the other person making a fallacy, respectfully point it out. Try to look for common ground. Be willing to ask the person to support their position or to state what evidence that they are relying on. Try and be clear in the use of language. Avoid ambiguous and vague terminology and grammar. Communication is key, so clearly define the key terms that you're using when you present an argument so that you're not misunderstood by other people, and don't be afraid to ask questions of those with whom you interact to make sure that you get their point and that you understand what they meant. Very important, not to confuse the person's argument and the quality of their argument with the character of the person that makes the argument. Sometimes people say things that you just won't agree with, but even when they do that, you shouldn't jump to the conclusion that this is a bad person, this is a bad human being. Sometimes people can make bad arguments, but they can be good people in general. So you don't want to necessarily equate the quality or lack thereof of a person's argument with their personality, character, or moral record. Resist the temptation to counterattack if someone attacks your character or threatens you because of your position on a particular issue. When people start insulting each other and trading insults, then the argument can escalate. People might be frustrated and have their feelings hurt, and at the end of the day, nobody really wins in that situation. So it's okay for you to point out fallacies, to direct someone back to the proper course of argument, but we should try our best not to hit each other with low blows, because after all, we want to learn from each other and have a meeting of the minds. Yes, Noah, we've all heard such kind of casual personal attacks been exchanged back and forth, especially in this particular moment that we're in right now. Know your topic. Try to do your research. When you talk about something, be fully informed about it, because when people ask you for follow-up questions, you don't want to be like, sorry, I didn't know that, or I didn't think about that. So be well informed on a topic before you go into a debate or discussion. Adopt a position of skepticism. Don't be so confident that you think you have to win. If you're obsessed with winning in the argument, sometimes that's what causes you to make fallacies, because instead of giving it up or conceding the point, you resort to a more irrational form of argumentation. So sometimes you have to be willing to take an L and let the other person's point speak louder than yours, and sometimes the other person's evidence is going to be more credible than yours. If that happens, you don't need to take it personally. Losing in an argument or having another person that's a quality debater does not necessarily make you a poor person or a worse person. So don't be obsessed with winning every argument. Look at it rather as cooperation with the other person to find the truth instead of me versus you and who's going to win this battle or whatever. And also watch your body language. Sometimes when people are saying things that you don't agree with, your body language can get aggressive, hostile, and it can betray the more common rational assessment of the argument that you should be engaged in. So those are just a few general tools and hints about how to operate as you deal with people in the world of argument and discussion. Now, we don't have more topics or material on fallacies, so the rest of today's meeting, whatever amount of time it takes, what I thought we would do is just kind of go back through the list one time, and I would ask any members here to try and give some example if they can think of one. And with that, we'll have one last little piece of review so that you'll be as prepared as you can be for the Tuesday quiz next class. Next class, we won't have one of these live stream meetings as before when you took your midterm and the first quiz. You're just going to be mailed the document right before our class time starts, and then you'll have until the expiration of the class time, 2:10 p.m., to send back your answers to me as a file to my email. So let's try and take a step back and just do one last review of all the fallacies. So looking back to the beginning of the fallacy chapter 5, the first category of fallacies were the fallacies of ambiguity. And the fallacy of ambiguity is labeled as such because they are arguments which contain ambiguous words, sloppy grammar, or a confusion between two similar concepts. And by the way, no, I'm not sick of anything that you've said or done, so that's not correct. But anyway, I always appreciate your commentary. To the question, though, of equivocation, let's ask that. Who knows or remembers what's equivocation? Let's get the definition, and then from there, maybe we'll be able to provide an example or two. What's the equivocation fallacy? So when this part of the class meeting is more, student action because we're reviewing at this point. So it's not teaching a new concept, but rather going back in your notes or your memories. So let's do that and tell me what's equivocation. Okay, good, Preston. So use of the same word but with different definitions. Right. So it's when there's an argument that uses a certain word or term multiple times, but the meaning of it is different where it appears in the different places. Correct. Can anybody think of an example of an equivocation fallacy? Maybe you can come up with one that's not just something that I've already said. Let me see if anyone has a thought about that. What could be a case of equivocation? It's okay to take a few moments, but since I want you to be able to generate some examples too, I'd see if you have some thoughts on this. Equivocation. Because one part of the test, on the quiz rather, is going to be to ask you to give some examples. Most of the quiz is going to be, hey, here's an example of a fallacy, which name is it? But then I'll also have a second section which asks you to come up with a few cases. So what could be an equivocation fallacy? Think of like a word that could be understood in different ways. And then imagine how conversation or argument could play out where the different meanings are implicated in the statement. I know that I gave you an example like of this kind. Joe's at the bank. Bank is a financial institution, so Joe's at a financial institution. And in that example, I said, okay, suppose that bank in the first premise is referring to the riverbank, and in the second premise, it's clearly referring to a financial bank. If that's the case, we've equivocated on bank, and so the conclusion doesn't work anymore. But what about you? Can you think of something that's along those lines? Just create something. Because if you can't, I'll just literally sit here for 20 minutes. I don't care. Okay, prove. Can it be like in the restroom signage? Women to the left because men are always right. Ah, there you go. Okay. Well, the word right, as I guess you know, could be interpreted to mean correct, or it could mean the directional sense of right. In fact, sometimes when you're driving with people, this equivocation happens in our conversation with each other. Someone will be like, which turn do I take? Do I go to the left? And then the person says right. And it's confusing to the one who asked the question because they're not sure. Are you saying right like left is the correct direction? Or are you trying to reverse my statement and it's not left, go instead to the right? So, I mean, you can, of course, that's a good example, Prue. Paul, Americans drive on the right side, Brits drive on the wrong side. There you go, yeah, so right in the sense of right side, but also correct. Now, in the way you guys have both written it, there's not the appearance of the word right twice, but I'm sure that it would be easy enough to supply that. Like, Americans always drive on the right side, and let's see, doing what's right is doing what's correct. So Americans always drive on the correct side. As such, that would be like an equivocation fallacy. Okay, good, fair enough. Sure, there's others that we could give, but we want to keep moving. So the next example, amphiboly. Amphiboly is a fallacy that can occur in statements or arguments where there's some kind of grammatical mistake or ambiguity. And because of that mistake or ambiguity, we don't know what conclusion to draw, or there's multiple different conclusions that could be drawn or inferences that could be drawn. So like one example was Shivo's mother and her husband don't agree about whether to pull the plug. In that case, her becomes grammatically ambiguous because we can't tell whether it refers to the mother of Shivo or Shivo herself. Whose husband, in other words, the husband of Shivo or the husband of Shivo's mom, her dad. So to those at the meeting, can you think of any other possible amphiboly example? An amphiboly? I have a few more in mind, but let's see if you can think of one. Amphiboly. So one case could be, the case mentioned here with just a different example of mixed up pronouns where we don't know who's referred to or what is referred to by the pronoun. That's some grammatical ambiguity. What do you think? So it's one thing to know the definition. It's another to be able to generate an example based on the definition. So I'm just trying to give us both sides of that. And it's something where I can't really do it for you, so I want to try and get you to do it. So if you could try and throw out something that's on the realm of the amphiboly. Okay, Preston, you say this. I'm hanging out with my friend Jay and Bill at his house. There you go. Okay, good. So his house, whose house? Jay and Bill are two men, apparently, as the names indicate. So his is a singular masculine pronoun, but it's in reference to two possible subjects, and so it's impossible to say. I think the other day I heard a friend talk about politics, and I think they committed an amphiboly. It was something like, do you remember the debate between Trump and Biden, the second one? And I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. He's like, yeah, I think he killed him. I think he won big time. And I had to ask a follow-up, like, wait, who do you mean? Because you say Trump and Biden had a debate and then he won. But I don't know who won. You say he, but there's two guys that ran for president. So anyway, yeah, another example. There could also be plural pronoun ambiguity, like with the word they or them, in case there's two different plural subjects to whom the term could refer. Okay. Next, let's continue then, I guess. Thanks, Preston. What about fallacy of accent? So that's a fallacy that can occur where the meaning of a statement or argument changes depending on which word or phrase in it is emphasized or accented, as they say. So in one case, the book talked about, didn't I say don't play with matches? Oh, I wasn't playing with them, though. I was setting things on fire to be, mean. That would be, of course, to emphasize the word play in a way that narrows its definition from don't touch them to don't create games with them. Or the case of proof texting. Someone tells you, hey, join our cult because haven't you read the Bible? It says, be the brother's keeper. Well, who do you think it means when it says be your brother's keeper? We're the brethren. So that's what it meant. It was referring to us. But by placing emphasis on that part of the scripture, it becomes proof text. And that's another case of the accent fallacy. Don't you know drinking and driving is illegal? Okay. Well, how is that an accent, though? I'm not sure if I follow. Oh, I get it. I get it. Perfect, Preston. That's funny. I'm not drinking and driving. You see, the drink is in the cup holder. I drank it right before I started driving. I'm not doing both simultaneously. That's a very fun one. Okay, so in that case, by adding emphasis to the word and, it makes it seem as though the person interpreted the rule as you can drink and then after that you can drive. But you may not do the two things at once. So drinking while driving is not okay, but drinking first and then driving is okay. Obviously that would be wrong. We're not talking about you may not do them simultaneously, but you can do them in a sequence. That's not what is meant. It means don't have any alcohol in your system beyond a certain level while driving. Okay, that was a good one, Preston. Yeah, thanks. Next, let me speak about the division fallacy. In the fallacy of division, a person makes an erroneous inference from the characteristic of a whole group to the characteristics of an individual member of the group. So the format is like group G has characteristic C, X is a member of G, and therefore X has characteristic C. Not always a fair, valid inference. So if I say to you that men are taller than women, and then I continue by saying Danny DeVito is a man, it certainly does not follow that he individually is taller than the average woman, because he's a very short man that's like 4'11". So even though he's a member of a group which taken as a whole has that quality, it's not shown in each member of the same group. That would be a division fallacy. Anybody can think of another example of division, perhaps? Just following that same kind of format? Go ahead, guys. Don't let Preston do everything. Let me know. Somebody's cute, no? Oh, Danny DeVito? Is he? Maybe. So, I mean, I guess depending on your taste, he's bald, he's short, but he's funny, he's very rich. But I digress. Can you tell me about an example of the division fallacy? Noah's been hacked, y'all. It's not Noah, just kidding. But anyway, yeah. Division, who's got something? Sometimes it just takes a minute, but we've got plenty of time. It's too funny. Fair enough, man. But I have a question though, Noah. Are you forgetting my question? I say, what's an example of the division fallacy? Maybe Preston, we're gonna have to bring you back off the bench. But I'm surprised because we got so many people here that did really well with these things, I think, and that know them. So I mean, you should be able to tell me a division fallacy example. I mean, it's not that hard. All you got to do is say, here's a group with a feature, then identify a member of that group that doesn't have the feature, and just reach the conclusion that they have it. Yeah, but I mean, it's one of those days. You see the text of the syllabus where it says, Thursday, April 15th, review of all argument fallacies. This is what that is. It's not me teaching you stuff. It's me asking you, hey, some questions about it, give me examples, and I guide you through that so that you can have a little bit more experience generating the fallacies. So, I mean, you have to say something. You have to type out an example. Or you might not do as well on the quiz. I mean, that's up to you too. Noah, oh wow, you were at the Black Lives Matter protest. You must have been rioting and looting. Probably not a good example. Well, okay, maybe not, but let me work with what you're saying. Perhaps someone thinks that, okay, like talk about rioting. So let me think. I'm trying to give an example. Like rioters, obviously the riot itself is like hugely destructive and dangerous, right? So the riot had to be shut down by the police because it was too dangerous. And Michelle was one person that was present at the riot. So she had to be shut down by the police, and she's dangerous. It's not necessarily the case. I mean, so when people combine together and form a big crew that riots, the riotous mob has certain features that maybe every individual of the mob does not have. So even if the riotous mob as a whole is like a hugely destructive force, it's not necessarily true that every individual member that's present in the group is the same way. I guess that you could say, Noah, yeah, directed to an individual. So that's how division is. You have a quality that you show in a big group or a big set of things. It doesn't have to be a set of people. It could also be like the hotel room is big, so each room is big. That's not necessarily true. Preston, you saw a nasty one on Twitter. I know not all men are abusers, but I don't know which ones are, so I look out for all men. To which someone replied, this is the same logic racists use against people of color. Yeah, that makes some sense, I guess. So you can think, well, who are those that are the culprits in domestic violence cases most often? I mean, it's a high percentage of male against female violence, just for whatever reason, men are more aggressive as a general matter. Of course, not to confuse that with the case of each individual, but masculine people, you know, masculinity, heteronormative sort of behavior that we all know about traditionally could have more to do with being violent or aggressive. So men are more abusive than women. So here's one man, and therefore he's more abusive than any woman that he might encounter. Not necessarily true. So that's a good example also, Preston. Okay, good. I'm glad that we had a little bit of back and forth. You guys had some interesting examples there. There's also composition fallacy, okay? With composition, basically, you have the opposite of division. So it starts with a claim that some individual has a feature, and then it's noted that they're a part of a larger group, so therefore the whole group has the same feature. But that's not necessarily true either. Take one atom in my body. That atom, you can't see it without a microscope. So I am the set of all atoms collected as a big aggregate. Does that mean that I cannot be seen without a microscope? Obviously not. So the parts you can't see without one, but the whole that they form together when they compose something can be. So obviously the parts of a whole don't always have the same features that the whole has, and vice versa. And so that's both sides of composition. Can anybody else think of a case of composition? So the argument basically is going to lead to a conclusion which says that the whole group has this feature. And the evidence, the premise, is just going to say, here's a member of group who has that feature. Can you think of an incorrect inference from the part to the whole? What do you think? I think I gave an example before, like while you're thinking and trying to write something in the chat, I'll just keep telling you about other examples. I mentioned before that I'm a advanced degree holder, and so then someone might say, I'm a member of the Vulich family, so the Vulich family is a bunch of advanced degree holders. Even though that's typically the case, it's not the case with me, because I'm not from a family that has that kind of educational attainment, with me the one exception. So that could be a composition fallacy there. But I'm talking too much. Let me hear it from you. What's another example? Now all you can think of is like Gestalt psychology, Paul. What, like, let me understand. It's been a while since I've studied it, but isn't it something along the lines of whole versus part? Like my behavior as a whole is not necessarily governed by one small aspect of my psychology, maybe, or if you have more details, you'll add to it. No, here's what you've said. People who are white supremacists support Trump. I see you have a Trump flag, so therefore you must be white supremacist. No, you're still going, that's still division. That would be a good example, perhaps, of division. But composition finishes at the end with all of these people are such and such, not just one. See, division is where you finish with one member. Composition is where you finish with the whole group. So close, but not quite. Jonah, I'm a male, you attend OCC, so everyone that attends OCC is a male, sure. The group is kind of loosely defined as the students of OCC, but yes, fair enough, technically speaking, it's a good example. Prue, is this fallacy a bit similar to hasty generalization? It is kind of similar to hasty generalization, Prue, but the one difference is that with composition, we're more concerned with part-whole relations, and with hasty generalization, we're more concerned with jumping to the conclusion too quickly. So like if I had one bad experience with a woman and then said all women are cheaters, that would be hasty generalization. But if I say like, you know, the rooms in the hotel are small, so the whole hotel is small, that's composition because the rooms literally build the hotel, they compose it, you know, so it's similar, and I'm not going to deny that. But if you want to think about the dividing line between them, it's on the side of hasty generalization, it's not having a big enough sample size when you jump to a conclusion. And with composition, it's more like this part does not really stand for what the whole is that it's a part of. Okay, Preston, you're a street racer that drives a Honda, and so therefore all street racers drive Hondas. Fair enough. Good. Noah, Ryan is a Trump supporter, and Ryan is an avid racist, so therefore they're all. That would be a good example of composition. Correct. Yes. So you got it right that time, Noah, where we conclude with something about the whole group. Obviously, we can't make broad claims about overall groups based on one member of it. So yeah. Okay, cool. So then let's see what's next. In the next category was all the fallacies of relevance that you guys have, I'm sure thought a lot about in doing your homework. There's 8 of them. The first one was ad hominem, okay? Pretty straightforward. What is ad hominem? Personal attack fallacy. So that's where you, instead of replying to the individual's argument, you make a personal attack on them. You make it personal. So what do you think would be a personal attack? An ad hominem fallacy? Like, first of all, we have to imagine someone coming to you with a claim. And then you don't really tell the person why their claim is wrong, but you just make some personal insult or abuse towards them specifically. So imagine the response given to someone making an argument to you, and tell me what kind of example you can come up with. So what do you know about blank? Just look at the fact that blank and something totally personal that's not related to the argument. Okay, I'm not saying in any way that I'm a street racer that endorses or promotes street racing. Fair, okay, I wouldn't have assumed so, but yes. Do you have more to say on this? Or is it that's in reference to your comment? I mean, yeah. But anyway, I still want this example, if you can give me one, of personal attack. No, I mean, yeah, I don't necessarily have strong views on street racing. I mean, I guess if you're doing it in a time or place where there's a lot of other motorists and you're causing hazards, that's not great. But we've all sometimes driven a little fast. I guess it could be fun. Anyway, Jonah, you say, what do you know about being fit? It looks like you eat a pizza a day, you pig. Okay, I guess that would sort of be fair enough. Suppose that the person says, to be fit, you really need to have a healthy diet and a consistent exercise regime where you both have cardio and some kind of resistance training. And the person says, no way, you don't know anything about that because, look at your body. Okay, that'd be one good example, yes. Noah, I mean, come on, Noah. I love your comments, but you still should answer my questions, right? You don't want to try and answer them? It's like, it would be a little bit better if, you answer some of the questions and then also make the side comments, because otherwise it makes it seem as though you're using me as a means to an end of getting some kind of humor. But you still have to participate in the class and give the examples. So, I mean, take some energy aside to write out an example. Well, anyway, Jonah, you gave us a pretty good one. But I would have loved it if there's more than just one. There's, 17 students here. Some of us putting a lot of comments in. So, do some labor. Really need to do research though? Just off the freestyle, man. What's an insult? Think of an insult and work backwards from there. So you say this insult to someone in order to blow away their argument about something that has nothing to do with that. I would have thought this one's not the toughest one. Okay, Preston, you don't agree with this economic policy that makes you a fascist. There you go, yeah. So calling someone a fascist or whatever just because they don't agree on some economic argument. Or you could say to the person, if you don't agree with my argument on this, then you must be just ugly or stupid or wrong in some case like that, right? So making a personal attack that's not related to the argument. In general, here you go, Preston. Yeah, that was your example. Jonah, you gave an example. All right, so we got a few of them. Noah, maybe you'll come back to us when you find something on the internet through Google. Okay, so let's continue. You won't give 9 out of 10 of your paycheck to your dope-smoking neighbor. You must be a fascist. Well, look, okay, let's make sure, though, that you understand something, Paul. The thing is, it has to be in response to an argument. It has to be in response to an argument. It can't be like I just walk up to someone and be like, yo, you're ugly. That's an insult, but it's not a personal attack fallacy because I'm not saying your argument is invalid because you are ugly. So you have to kind of make the case where it's in reaction to someone's position that they stated. In Preston's case, I guess, well, you're saying you're expanding on Preston's case, but you all, oh, okay, 9/10 of the paycheck. So that's the economic connection. I got you now, Paul, but was a little slick, so it took me a minute to catch on. Okay, got you. So like, let me understand you, Paul. You're saying like a characterization of the economic policy is that it's in favor of giving 90% of your money away to a neighbor that does not work. And so if you don't agree with that policy, you must be a fascist. But in a way, though, you kind of characterize the position on the behalf of the opponent in a way that could also be seen as a straw man, because people don't usually say that's what they believe when they view redistribution of wealth as a priority for the state. But okay, I got you. So Noah, you don't want companies and rich people to get high tax rate to help the community. You must be a hyper-capitalist Republican that does not care about the working class. Okay, yeah, so there is another good example, making it personal against the person without considering the merits of the proposed policy. If you didn't like the policy that says that there should be more tax leniency for wealthy people, then you should say why that policy doesn't serve the people or why it's not good for the country. And if you think that redistribution of wealth is the right policy, then that should be what you defend, but you shouldn't be attacking the person who holds a different view on a personal basis. Okay, why limit ourselves to one fallacy? Well, because I'm trying to, because for pedagogical purposes, obviously, Paul, I mean, you're really asking that question. It's because I'm trying to teach students one thing at a time and to keep their minds clear so that they're not confused. So the clearest examples are ones that don't blur things together. Okay, so then next up, what about scare tactics? That's easy to explain. The scare tactic fallacy is when you're trying to make someone back away from their position or to agree with yours out of the feeling of fear for some reason. So an appeal to force, as they sometimes call it. The use or threat, at least, of force, whether that's physical, psychological, legal, or emotional. So like someone says, hey, don't tell me that you believe in, let's see, the infrastructure plan of Biden, because I don't want anyone at this company to have those views. Do you understand me? Now, in that case, the person is basically threatening the loss of your employment if you don't change your political perspective to theirs. But that's not telling you what's wrong with the position or why it's not to be valued or agreed with. Instead, it's just to threaten and scare you. Paul, you say, I know when you're traveling from Chapman back, I'll find you if you don't stop criticizing me. Okay, well, yeah, we're all going to die sometime, right? So just have at it. It doesn't really matter. Okay, next up, appeal to pity. Pity is invoked in an argument where it's not relevant to the disputed conclusion or claim. So like cases where someone says, don't give me a ticket, officer, because I'm sad today, my goldfish died, or don't give me a ticket, officer, I just watched a really sad documentary. Have you seen Blackwater? I've been shook ever since I watched it. So yeah, these are some various examples. It's usually got to be some kind of request for sympathy or concern that's weak and insignificant in comparison to the stakes or the context that they're dealing with. I think I would ask you, can you give me some appeal to pity? But I feel like that one will be easy, right? All you got to do is think of like weak reasons to ask for sympathy. Like, oh, I chipped my nail yesterday and I can't focus on my classes, so I need an extension on the homework. Preston, why were you late to work? Hey, give me a break, my dog died. Well, Preston, I mean, with a dog dying, it's almost crossing the line for me. I feel like if a dog has died and if it's your like loyal companion, they say man's best friend, right? I mean, it's pretty depressing. That could probably take you out of work for a day or two. So I'm not going to say that's wrong. I would totally give you credit for it. But just in general, because the textbook says like, oh, well, if your daughter was choking on a coin, then that would not really be appeal to pity. That would be legit. If I had a student coming to me that could actually show me and prove that their dog died, I think I would probably care enough about it. Don't come to me with those excuses, though, if you don't have a dog, but you understand. Dogs and cats are pretty close. No, why are you going 90 on the freeway? I'm sorry, my Sprite that LeBron gave me split, so I had to hurry home to get another one. Sure, okay. Maybe if I added a year ago. Oh, a year ago, okay, that would be a little better. It's too long for you to hold on to the trauma and depression for that long. Shoot, my homework may be wrong then. Well, assume any excuses appeal to pity. No, not necessarily, Paul, and it says that in the book. We went into that too. It says, I'll read it. Not all appeals to pity are fallacious. There are times when a person's plight calls for a sympathetic response. For example, please don't give me a ticket, officer. My toddler is in the back seat, swallowed a nickel, and is having trouble breathing. I have to get her to the hospital right away. Well, I know you didn't attend the lecture on that day, so maybe you skimmed that part, but anyway, not to worry. I'm sure you're fine overall. Next, it was popular appeal. Popular appeal. With popular appeal, you try to appeal to popular opinion to support your conclusion or claim. when it's not really relevant, though, to the content of the claim itself. So in case somebody says God exists because, hey, look, 90% of people believe in it, so done deal, he exists. That would be a popular appeal. You'd rather argue why you think there's evidence for God's existence instead of just pointing out the distribution of popular opinion. Memory, I mean, when it comes to school, it's pretty good, yeah. In general, though, I don't know. I try to forget as much as possible because I don't need a lot of stuff in my head. Popular appeal sometimes is used to support claims based on polls. Like someone says, look, we did a survey and it says like 60% of Americans want to go to war, so therefore it's a good idea. I'm not saying I've actually looked at such a survey, but in general, decisions about policy, war, and peace have to be made by experts and specialists and not just done on the basis of polling data. Sometimes what's popular is not necessarily sound as policy. And there's examples like that in the book. Sometimes popular appeal is also seen in a separate kind of case when a celebrity figure is used to support a product or service, and it's merely their popularity rather than anything about the product that is driving the sale. Preston, 90% of people agree that universal background checks, despite Congress in several states saying that they don't agree with it. There you go, yeah. So are universal background checks a good policy or not? Just saying that it's overwhelmingly popular is not the end of the argument. You'd have to say why it would actually serve the interests and needs of the citizens independently of its degree of popularity. There are some policies that are wildly popular, but they're just not practical to carry out or sound to carry out. In my mind, I think there are fair arguments in favor of some kind of expanded gun controls, but I would not merely look at the citation of an opinion survey as my main evidence. I'd rather look at the rate of homicide and gun death that we see as compared with other countries where the laws are different. That would be the right kind of data to use. But anyway, it's a common point. Politicians point those things out. You know, they'll say, I have the support of the public behind me. But why do you deserve to have the support of the public behind you? That's the right thing to say to defend your policy position. Okay, good. Well, appeal to ignorance. That is when a person says that something is true only because no one's proven it's false. Or reverse, someone says that something is false because no one has been able to prove that it's true. So I can't sit here right now and tell you, look, Bigfoot's real, because can you prove he doesn't exist? I mean, people say things like that, but that's fallacious. Real evidence is evidence for something, not just a lack of evidence that it's false. Hasty generalization, making a general sweeping claim based on a sample that's either too small or not representative. We talked about the case of like experience with a couple of abusive men leads a person to the overly hasty general conclusion that all men are abusive. Can you think of any other hasty generalization example? What do you think? A case where a person, you know, they go straight to like all of these things are like that, but they're using limited evidence to reach that conclusion. Hasty generalization, what do you think? Aliens exist because the universe is so big that there's no way to prove that it can't have intelligent life. Okay, good, but that's in reference to appeal to ignorance. And we're now on to the next. So good example, but rather for the other fallacy before this one. What about hasty generalization though? You can work backwards from like, if you like, the conclusion. So produce an all statement in your mind, like, but make it something that could be derived from insufficient evidence or experience. All what? I mean, like think of your own experience, right? So I live in Long Beach. I had a bike stolen from my balcony one time. I think I maybe talked to you guys about that earlier in the semester. So I could come to the conclusion that, look, my bike was stolen, so this is just a high crime area. There's a lot of crime everywhere. Tons of criminals in Long Beach. Everyone's a criminal because one time my bike got stolen. Maybe what happened with my bike was not representative of the general pattern that people see in this community. So if I just used that as the only sole basis for this big, broad claim, it would be a hasty generalization, perhaps. But, you know, that's me saying it. What about you? Can you give me something? There's a bird in your room right now? Oh, no. Really? Like flying around in there? Damn. Talking about a pigeon? Little blue jay or something? What kind of bird is that? I hope you're all right. It's not hostile to you, right? What, just flew in through the window? That's crazy. Anyway, but hasty generalization. Bird flew into my room today. So wherever you live, birds flew into everyone's house. I mean, or this, you expect it's going to happen every day or something. Maybe that's just not enough information to draw that big sweeping conclusion. Preston, you were in the middle of typing. My area is a low crime area because I never see anything happen in my neighborhood. Okay, yeah, so I guess you could say that too. I've never had anything stolen from me, so this city where I live is crime-free. That would be perhaps a hasty generalization just derived off the sample of your individual experience. You have to look at public data that's collected to really make reasonable claims about all or no of a certain kind of thing have a feature. Okay. Well, anyway, Jonah, maybe can you get out? Is the bird injured? Is it a healthy bird? I hope so. Good luck for you, I guess, right? Could that be a good luck charm? They say that a cat is black cat, 7 years bad luck. So I'm making this up right now. A bird flying in your window is 10 years of amazing luck and prosperity. So congrats. Well, what was after that? There was straw man and red herring. Straw man fallacy, when you misrepresent your opponent's actual argument to make it sound worse, to make it sound easier to defeat or to rebut. Someone says, let me think. You have a cat too? Oh yeah, well, those two don't mix, so I guess you gotta make sure they stay separated. Is it like you can't get it out because there's no easy way to guide it towards the exit? I know it's a separate discussion, but it's kind of funny and interesting to me. Straw man. So someone says, I can't believe that we got these people out there that are saying, let's stop the police from, all these officer-involved shootings, because these people are saying that we should not have police. And if we don't have police, what are you going to do? Call a cowboy when someone's breaking into your house? So obviously that argument's terrible. But, that's kind of a misrepresentation of the argument in favor of police reform. People are not literally saying, let us eliminate the police forces, but rather perhaps allocate resources differently, retrain them, etc. So you could see that as one possible straw man. Paul, you've got some nice advice. Okay. Yeah, you'll have to do that, I guess. Has this ever happened to you before, Jonah? Is this something, this is the first time that's happened in your life? I wonder. Because it's pretty rare, I would assume. But you heard the strawman example, right? So taking the position in favor of like resource allocation to the police, shifting the priorities, maybe adding more like mental health professionals and changing the way that policing is done at traffic stops. So like reform gets characterized as abolition. That could be strawman. What about red herring? Okay, let's see what you say, Mateo, here. We should cut down on emissions. Oh, so basically you're saying we should never burn fossil fuels. Good. Okay, so Jonah, this has happened to you before. So maybe you got a little experience you can draw on that to help rectify the situation. Red herring, okay. Red herring was the one where you're trying to just change subjects. You're changing topics to something else that's not related to the original topic. So a person says, I really think that drinking and driving is a huge issue, and I would not do that if I was you. It's certainly dangerous. You can cause an accident. And then you say to them, what do you mean drinking and driving? There's no problem with that, because I see people out there texting and driving, doing whatever, like Messenger while they're driving, having phone calls while they're driving. So how is drinking and driving a bad thing? It's not. But that's changing the topic to something else. Yeah, Jonah, I'll definitely look at your video. If you have a way of like saving it onto an MP4 and then like sending it to me, that'd be kind of cool to see. Yeah, so red herring, guys, changing of topic, some examples in the book. Oh yeah, the United States seems to have problems with the way we treated our detainees in Guantanamo Bay. That amounts to torture. That's wrong. And someone says, oh, come on, don't say that. Look at what they do to people in North Korea. You don't even get tortured. You're just going to get killed on the spot, or maybe you get tortured, but it's not just going to be waterboarding. It's going to be like cutting your hands off and stuff. Obviously, though, if other countries are doing things even worse, that's no necessary reason to support the behaviors and overreach of our own government. So that would be change of topic. Okay. So anyway, then we got to the case of the unwarranted assumption fallacies, which was last lecture. So I mean, for that, I don't know how much review you really want, but I'll just kind of blast through some of them pretty quickly. Preston, you argue for the use of nuclear power, then you don't really care about preserving and improving the environment. Okay, yeah, so it's like a change of topic. You want to use nuclear power, but what I think what we really need to do is to focus on a different topic or issue. Well, I don't know, Preston, let me think about your current example. You argue for the use of nuclear power, then you don't really care about the production of nuclear power poses environmental risks and hazards. Like if the nuclear reactor ever melts down, then we're going to have like an uninhabitable area for a long time after that, waiting for the radiation to dissipate. So you could argue that that's a reasonable way of responding to a position in favor of nuclear power. I was thinking that you might have said like, oh, you argue for the use of nuclear power, but look, nuclear power is not a good idea. To be honest with you, what I think we really need to do is look at, I don't know, like some different topic altogether that has nothing to do with energy production. You argue for the use of nuclear power, but have you really considered the fact that we need to renegotiate relations with Russia? I mean, our relationship with Russia is at its lowest point. So let's not worry so much about nuclear power and instead focus on a relationship with this other country. That would be a total red herring. Politicians do this all the time. They call it pivoting, right? So watch a press conference with one of your favorite politicians, and when the person gets a question that they don't like, they'll turn to something else. This happens sometimes. I mean, so like even, Trump has done it, Biden has done it. Recently, I was watching one of Biden's press conferences, and I mean, there's a lot of good information he put out there, but at one point they were trying to ask him about the border issue. You know, some people are saying that there's a surge of immigrants coming because they think that he's less punitive with respect to border policies. And so they say to him, what's up with your border issue? And he says, look, the American people elected me to fix the COVID problem. And what we're doing right now is we're distributing vaccines to everybody. So that's a real problem. You could say that's a red herring. And with Trump, the classic case is, well, what about our emails when he's asked about anything else in relationship to his own policy positions when he was debating Clinton. Okay, so anyway then, begging the question would be making an argument where the conclusion is the same as one of the premises. So it's like where you say abortion's wrong because it's just not right to end a pregnancy. That's saying the same thing twice over. It's not giving an independent reason. It's just saying it's wrong because it's wrong. Changing the wording of abortion to ending a pregnancy, changing the wording of immoral or wrong to not right. You have to give evidence in the premises that's different from the conclusion. Inappropriate appeal to authority. My English professor said that I should not wear a mask because it's not safe and you can get sick just wearing a mask, so I'm not wearing one anymore. The English professor, you can't pit their experience against infectious disease specialists. That person's not qualified to speak on that topic, or at least they're not the kind of expert that you should defer to. So that would be inappropriate appeal to authority. Loaded question. Where did you bury the body? And you say you don't know anything about it. That would be a loaded question because I'm saying you did it, and the question is where. But if the denial has been given, then you can't answer that question in a certain way. We see that in lawyering and law enforcement sometimes. The lawyer, the skilled lawyer, will try and get someone to confess to greater culpability than they might have wanted to through the asking of leading questions, loaded questions. In press conferences, we see that too. Like the other day, one was talking to Jen Psaki, the White House press officer, the person who does the daily briefing, and they were like, can you tell us when you're going to stop with your irresponsible rhetoric about the Georgia voting law? And Psaki, was not going to concede that that was a properly formed question. So she said, well, look, I'm first of all going to have to dispute your characterization that we've misrepresented the law. And so I can't answer why we have used rhetoric that misrepresents it, because we are just telling you that it's a new Jim Crow. And so anyway, like maybe that's an example you can draw on. False dilemma, reducing the responses to a complex issue to a simple binary either or choice. Like asking someone or telling someone, look, I know that you're either a hardcore right-wing nationalist or a far left socialist. It's got to be one or the other, but I haven't seen you waving the flag, so you must be one of those socialists. That would be a false dilemma because there's obviously a whole world of middle ground positions and independent political philosophies that are not on either extreme. So proposing that you're one or the other of two choices where there's more than two would be a false dilemma. questionable cause. You step on a crack, your mom hurts her back, you think that must have caused it. But obviously that's questionable. So this is whenever a person assumes that A is the cause of B when there's no real logical relation between them. Sometimes in Latin it's called the post hoc fallacy, and that's supposed to indicate that just because something comes after something else does not mean that it was the effect of the earlier event. I mean, I was born back in the 80s, and let's see. Then after I was born, George H.W. Bush won the election in 88, but I'm not saying I was born in 88, but you know, some years after I was born, then Bush won. That doesn't mean that I was the cause of his winning. Like, well, Vulish was born and then that happened later, so that must have been the cause. The causal connection is not there. So we have to have detailed reasons to think that something's the cause of something else. We can't just stipulate it or use superstition to make it seem as such. And I don't know. Yeah, and then the last few were the ones that we began with today, the slippery slope and then the naturalistic fallacy. So I think that's been covered in good enough depth. All right then, everyone. Well, that's it. I just wanted to have a kind of long-winded, rambling review of all the other fallacies that we've talked about, and also to finalize the list. So that's all done now. Now the last thing you have to simply do is turn in the homework assignment to me through email anytime before midnight tonight, and then I'll send the answer key for that on Saturday. Afterwards, on Tuesday, we will take our quiz. So I'll be in touch with anyone who needs anything through email over the weekend. And if you do need something, if you're looking for any of your previous scores or anything else, you can just check with me and I'll be able to get back to you as quick as possible. So yeah, are we all good to go, guys? If so, then let me know in the chat. And Jonah, if you find a way of posting this video and it's going to go on your YouTube or wherever, just let us know and it'd be fun to see. But yeah, let's see it. Are we all right? Good to go? GTG, thank you. Cool then, thanks Preston and everybody else that's here. Go ahead and would I be interested in investing in anything? No, I'm not gonna invest. Why invest? What's the reason? What's the real reason to invest? Ariana, thank you so much. You have a good weekend too. Cat coins, that'd be cool. Maybe then I would do it, just for the sake of having a few. Okay guys, take care. I'll see you next time. And thank you. Okay, bye-bye. Oh, you wait. Jonah, you dropped the link in the chat? I don't see it. But you know you can do that actually. You can copy and paste a URL or a web link. If you do that, it'll show up in the chat and it will always be there for people to click later. Do you want to do that really quick before I close this in case anyone actually wants to? Okay, I'll give you a second, Jonah. Yeah, go ahead and drop it in there. I think Paul, he's still getting to it. Don't leave us hanging forever, though. Get it in there. Or is it not so easy to do? You can tell me if that's the case. No, YouTube doesn't really block links, though, Preston. Like here, I'll show you as an example. Because I do it with Zoom. Sometimes I have like Zoom meetings that are simultaneous with the YouTube, and I just I drop a link. So like, see that? I open another window with CNN, and I just copied and pasted it. And if you click that comment, you'd go to CNN right now. So Jonah, I scrolled up though, and I never saw you drop any link. So so you will use your arrow key. Put it up to the search bar or your URL bar at the top of your browser, like highlight the whole thing and then hit Control-C. Then go to the chat and then hit Control-V. Or, you know what I mean, like your cut and paste buttons. You know what I'm saying? You want to try it? So like, open another window where the video URL is, Jonah. I'm just trying to help you out. Wherever you've got the link posted, go to that URL, copy and paste it into the body of the chat in the chat bar here. So it's Control on Windows, and on Mac, I don't even know what the symbol is. It's the little weird, looks like a tic-tac-toe board. Okay, well, anyway then, I guess you haven't uploaded it yet, Jonah, but you'll do it next time, and then you'll put it in the link, and we'll see it whenever that happens next week or after the quiz. So it's going to have to wait a little while, but that's fine. Okay, guys, thanks again. Take care, and I'll certainly see you guys soon. All right, bye-bye.